Wallach on Law examines criminal cases and criminal justice and asks the question, we are tough on crime, but is that helping? Can we be smarter and make us safer?
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Ian Wallach is a criminal defense attorney and civil rights lawyer in Los Angeles and New York. His cases have ranged from defense of the accused to the prosecution of governments in their treatment of convicts. He's a former Los Angeles deputy public defender and a frequent contributor on legal issues to radio and television shows nationwide.
You're out of order! You're out of order! The whole trial is out of order!
We're gonna need a bigger vote. This country, our courts are the great levelers. In our courts, all men are created equal.
This is Wallach on Law. Here's your host, Ian Wallach.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, and welcome to this week's edition of Wallach on Law. And we're going to be talking about a pretty severe topic. Today, we're going to be talking about gun control, and it is a hot issue. It's a hot issue for pretty sad and severe reasons. Ever since the massacre at Sandy Hook, there's been over 70 school shooting incidents, and these are incidents. These aren't victims. There's been over 70 since Sandy Hook. There's a lot of guns in this country, and there's a lot of people who have access to guns who should not have access to guns. Yet gun control remains among the most partisan and divisive topics in America. Now, the word gun itself, it doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution, but guns themselves, that guns might have gotten more people to read the Constitution than anything else, or at least the Bill of Rights, or at least one part of the Bill of Rights, or at least a tiny part of that part of the Bill of Rights, but it got people to the Constitution. And some people believe that even the tiniest gun regulation is simply unlawful and downright un-American. Now, other people believe that gun regulation is long overdue, and its change is just paramount. And unless we do something, more people will die who simply should not die. Our guests today are very different in both what they do and in how they perceive the role that the government should play in the control of guns. First, we have Richard Mack, Sheriff Mack as he's known. He's a Tea Party member. He's a former law enforcement officer. And he's got some very surprising thoughts about the war on drugs and changes that need to take place in the world of law enforcement. But he's also a steadfast believer in an unregulated right to possess a gun. And he believes that gun control legislation itself is unlawful. And we're going to hear what he has to say. And we don't have a mute button here, so we're actually going to let him speak and let him vent and let him set forth his ideas. And then we're going to speak to California Assembly Member Das Williams of the 37th District, which is where the massacre at Santa Barbara took place. He's the co-author of a bill that's moving its way through the legislature now, AB 1014. And what this bill seeks to do, I mean, he's going to tell you this, but what it seeks to do is provide a mechanism for someone like a law enforcement officer or a family member who recognizes that a person is unstable to go ask a judge and show lots of evidence to the judge, and if the judge decides, they can temporarily limit that person's access to guns. Is there common ground? What is the law? What is the history? And does history even matter when innocent people are dying? Things clearly are not okay. But can they change? Because I hope so, and I think they need to. And if so, what needs to happen to make this safer? That's what we're going to discuss today on Wallach on Law. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening, and let's begin. Okay, today we're going to welcome, as our guest to the show, Sheriff Mack. Now, Sheriff Mack is the former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona. He's a Tea Party member. He's exceptionally active in politics, frequently related to issues that are outside of law enforcement, or perhaps not directly related to law enforcement. Like me, he has sued presidents of the United States, in his case, Democratic presidents, and in my case, it was involved in the Gitmo litigation. But today, we're going to speak a little bit about some of the more current issues that we're seeing a lot in the media and some current trends. We're going to talk about law enforcement training. We're going to talk about accountability. We're going to talk about gun control. We're going to ask him what he refers to as the rights of individuals and pretty much anything that he wants to talk about as well. So, Sheriff Mack, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Well, that's all right. I appreciate you having me on. I think it's a privilege for anyone to ask for my opinions. My my children are still amazed that anybody in the country still wants to hear what I have to say.
Well, one of the things but before I do want to find out if your positions how they've changed over the time, especially in light of some recent events. But for my listeners who aren't familiar with your work, can you give them a little bit of your background, both in law enforcement and politics as well?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I would say that I just started out as a cop. I wanted to get in the FBI because that's what my father was. My father retired from the Bureau back in the mid-'70s, and I grew up in the FBI. And so I thought of my father's 5 sons, I would be the one to follow in his footsteps. And I tried, but never got into the FBI. It just didn't work out for one reason or another. So I stayed in police work for a while after I graduated from college, and that was in Utah. And at one point, though, I was writing a ticket, and I wrote a lot of tickets because that's what we were told to do. That's what I thought cops did. I've seen it on TV and I've seen it everywhere. That's what we do. We write tickets. And I became very disenchanted with the numbers game that police participate in. And I worked as an undercover narcotics officer, and after that, my views about government really started changing. So why are we arresting all these good people because they smoke pot? And then why do we turn right around and kill 50 times more people with legal drugs, such as alcohol and tobacco? And so I said, so if we're really going to get serious about going after drugs, why don't we stop alcohol and tobacco? But we've legalized those. And then I said, well, if we tried that couple of times, prohibition did not work. It made things worse.
Sure.
And so I really started studying those issues, and I started studying the drug war, and I found out that we're never going to arrest away addiction, and that treating people like that who have addiction problems and just putting them in steel boxes and cages is probably not the answer. In fact, it's not the answer. And so I have really changed my view on the drug war. I do not support the drug war anymore because the government does not secure our own borders, and they allow drugs to come in at our borders, and then they spend $92 billion a year to try to stop that which they should stop at the border.
And this war has been going on. I mean, it's been going on, since the beginning of the 19th century. It was probably, declared a little stronger under Nixon. But it seems like, if this is an actual war on drugs, do you think we are winning it?
Oh no, we've lost miserably. I think law enforcement community and governments need to get together with the community and churches and schools and others and try to work on a program and enforcement that would really have an impact and make things better. But the drug war and the enforcement of the drug war has made things worse.
Now, my understanding out here from law enforcement, and as you know, I'm a former public defender, still do a fair amount of indigent criminal defense work and defense work out here. But there is a pretty big numbers game, and it seems to be that there's a very anti-drug user culture embedded in the various law enforcement agencies out here. If you were to have this epiphany that you did and sort of realize, hey, maybe this isn't in the general good, didn't that somewhat render you as an outcast among your peers?
Yeah, it does a little bit, but I'm also part of a group that is just the opposite, and that's LEAP, L-E-A-P, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I've been a member of that. I've been on their Speakers Bureau, and I want to make it very clear. I do not support drug abuse of any kind, including alcohol and tobacco. I do not support any of those. I don't have a problem with medical marijuana, and if people want to use that and it makes them better and feel better, I know a lot of friends who have used it when they've been on their deathbeds, and it made them feel better, and it gave them some relief. And
it has some other benefits as far as helping them eat, etc., things that other medicines haven't been able to. Right.
Exactly, it did, and so I don't have any problem with that, and I don't have any problem with somebody.
I'm losing you a little bit here. Sheriff Mack?
Hello.
Sheriff Mack here. You're back now. I just lost you for a little bit.
Okay, good. All right. But the other thing I need to add to that, the other thing I discovered in all my studying about what government does that's probably counterproductive, I discovered the oath of office and the Constitution. And I was amazed that each and every public official swears an oath of allegiance to the United States Constitution, and thereby promising to protect the ideals and individual liberties that were supposed to be the foundation of America. And whether you like it or not, let's use the example you already talked about. Whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, gun control in America is against the law. That's what the Founding Fathers intended. That's what they meant. That's what the Second Amendment does. It prohibits gun control in this country.
All right. But I mean, I understand it. This is a huge deviation, and I'm very thankful that you're on here to share your opinion. But when you say, okay, we're going to follow the Constitution, we're going to protect an individual's rights. I mean, if you're talking about the Second Amendment, a lot of people will argue, is not as clear as you are asserting that it is, and we don't have any definitive authority.
That's the problem. That's the problem. It'll take 5 minutes for you to discover the intent of the Founding Fathers and the historical aspect of the significance of the Second Amendment.
Well, the Second Amendment, first of all, was you can see that it was an addition to the Constitution. It was not in the original Constitution. I mean, it certainly...
That's right.
So it's not going to be...
That makes this stronger. The Bill of Rights was established to make the Constitution stronger. The Founders, when they said, hey, we didn't go far enough, said we have to have a Declaration of Rights that government can never touch.
No, they didn't say government can never touch. They said government. They said they said it can be touched, provided that you have the sufficient amount of Congress that says, hey, this is no longer applicable. But I think the biggest argument
I don't agree with that.
But the question
there's no argument there.
But the question then is it more important, for example, than the preamble? But what about the preamble of the Constitution? I mean, what about...
The preamble is generalities. The preamble is the general purpose.
It is exactly the general purpose. The reason that we are getting here is to assure some basic, simple...
But you cannot... Wait. You cannot compare the Bill of Rights to the preamble.
Why not?
The preamble is setting the stage, because you had... The Founding Fathers were against a welfare state. And where it says the general welfare. The general welfare does not mean we create a welfare state. The Founding Fathers were against a welfare state. Mm-hmm. And so they're not contradicting each other themselves in that.
I think some people could argue that your interpretation of the Second Amendment
we don't promote
is it odds with the language in the preamble?
Again, and I'm trying to explain what you asked me.
Okay.
You want me to explain it?
I would like an explanation that I can understand, yes.
Okay, so if you look at the preamble and say, oh, well, it's the same as the Bill of Rights, that's just total bull. They are not the same. And that proves some problems with this perspective of understanding history.
So it's your position that the preamble...
You look at the Bill of Rights, and you look at the Bill of Rights, and you come back and you say, why did the Founding Fathers do that? Because it did not go far enough, and that's what they were concerned about. And Patrick Henry specifically did not like how the Constitution was a little bit too vague. And that was the preamble as part of it, because it was generalities. And they wanted a list of specific rights that government could never touch.
I agree.
And yes, you're absolutely correct. There is a way to amend the Constitution, and these were the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And if you want to change the Bill of Rights, and if you want to change the Second Amendment, go for it. But in the meantime, it's the law. Well, it is the supreme law.
First of all, before we talk about whether or not it's the supreme law, we're talking about some antiquated words written 250 years ago. A certain group of people,
so it doesn't apply today, so we don't have to obey.
No, we're just trying to understand what it means.
We don't understand.
You have an opinion. You have an opinion of what this right meant. Who else is it? Who else is it? I mean, on top of a tremendous amount of
who wrote it. It's the Founding Fathers who wrote it.
Well, okay, do me a favor. Then you can reiterate it. I mean, it doesn't simply say you have a right to bear arms.
There and say, as a lawyer, for you to tell your audience it's okay to disobey something because we think it's antiquated.
I'm saying it's okay to ask what it means. I'm saying it's violative to take a section of a right and use it against a public good. I am saying point to a single Supreme Court decision that says your exact interpretation is the right one, not it's still unclear. I could ask you to quote the Second Amendment right now. Everybody thinks, hey, it just says the right to bear arms. That's not what it says.
No, I could quote you all 27 words. I do it all the time.
Please do.
But for you to ignore the history.
I'm not ignoring the history, and history is essential.
Okay, what's the militia?
History's understanding.
What's the militia?
Let's
the militia?
Let's begin.
The militia?
I think right now people are afraid of it. But before you and I are talking about attacking it word by word, let's let the audience hear what it says.
And for you to pretend that the Supreme Court is the ultimate word on what freedom is and what liberty is.
No, just on what the law is. I think I can take that stance very clearly, and I can say the Supreme Court is the ultimate law. And if it's not, then you're the one acting outside.
So when the Supreme Court said and supported separate but equal doctrine, and they allowed black people to be put at the back of the bus,
horrible decision.
That was appropriate.
Horrible, terrible decision, and the binding law.
And the Supreme Court wouldn't know the Constitution or principles of liberty, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg already said that we have a horrible Constitution, and we should be following the Constitution of South Africa. You know, when you have somebody on the Supreme Court who takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and then completely disdains it publicly, and of course she's allowed to stay on for life, they are to do the same thing that cops are supposed to do. They are to do the exact same thing that legislators are supposed to do, and that is uphold, defend, and obey the United States Constitution.
Well, they're supposed to, right, and they also recognize it as a moving document. I mean, I don't see anything in a Constitution that talks about corporate interests. I don't see anything in our Constitution that says a corporation has a privacy right or a corporation has a First Amendment right.
No, but it allows.
So I mean, you can attack Sandra Day O'Connor for inventing a privacy right, and you can attack Justice Scalia for extending that privacy right to constitutions. To corporations. Those words aren't there. These are our present Supreme Court justices interpreting what those laws mean in light of the current current facts.
How about the Supreme Court? How about the Supreme Court decision that I did?
If you want to discuss your Supreme Court decision, no. Look, as every time I go into court, I have a problem getting any judge to follow.
Okay, who's supposed to enforce Supreme Court decisions?
Every lower court is supposed to enforce the Supreme Court decision.
No courts have enforcement arms. Sorry, you're wrong.
No courts have enforcement arms. I'm sorry. If I walk somebody into a courtroom and they're being charged with some meth that was seized at their home, and the officer got it by doing a warrantless search on their cell phone, and the judge says, "Hey, look, bailiff, lock him up," that person's going inside. Now, that's not because the bailiff just wants to do it. They're doing it at the direction of the judge.
Well, correct. And the enforcement arm of the court is the police or the executive branch. We are the executors of the law. And
well, wait. Are you the executors of the court itself? I mean, I do not know of an officer aside from a bailiff who works for a court. Usually it's a sheriff that works in connection. Usually they work for different municipalities or federal agencies. I do not know a police officer of the Supreme Court of LA Superior Court.
They don't have an enforcement arm, and the executor of the federal government is the president himself, and he is supposed to make sure that the decisions of the Supreme Court are put into practice and put into law. I can honestly tell you, I beat the Clinton administration at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I understand that you've sued the president on more than one occasion.
And I won.
But that's fantastic. And you know what? When I was working with the Center for Constitutional Rights, we successfully got habeas rights for the individuals. And that was the same problem that we had. I mean, people are still at Guantanamo, despite the fact that there has been 3 cases right now where they've said, "Hey, these individuals have a right to some sort of judicial oversight, or they have to be released." There's been 3, and it hasn't happened.
Overall, the problem with America is not that we follow our Constitution too strictly, and you're sitting here telling and giving excuses to people why we don't have to.
I'm not telling anybody not to follow the Constitution. I'm telling people, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that right now we have a system that is clearly broken. We've had 19 school shootings since the massacre at Sandy Hook. We've had 132 on schools since 1990. I'm saying people telling us, "Hey, just sit back and trust the system because it's working." It isn't. Okay, every time we have a law law enforcement officer that comes into interaction with someone who's mentally ill, we frequently have a death. We have a militarization right now. We have untrained law enforcement officers getting military-grade weapons, resulting in, for example, in the case of Dontre Hamilton, an individual being shot 15 times with 14 bullets because after the officer woke him with a baton and he unloaded a semi-automatic weapon. Okay, we have a system that is not working right now. You've been in law enforcement for 50 years. Tell us how to fix it.
Okay. First of all, I'm more government getting in the way and trying to pretend that they have the answers using the same Hitleric ideals.
Fine. Other ideas don't work. Give us some ideas that actually do.
Away from law-abiding citizens.
Give us some ideas that actually work.
Okay. How about the shooting of Miriam Carey in Washington, D.C.? How come nobody pays any attention to that? How come this woman driving around with her baby gets shot and killed by police when she was not armed, when she had done basically nothing wrong except go down the wrong street?
Absolutely terrible. What can be done to stop that from happening?
And confused.
I mean, so, media attention. We're getting media attention.
What you say, I agree with you. Police are not properly trained, and they're certainly not trained in keeping their oath, upholding and defending the supreme law of the land, which they are supposed to do. They're not trained in how to back away and not make a situation worse. But your question almost seems to ask,
no. But I want to applaud that answer for 1 second. No, but I think. Well, of course, our goal is to how to make a better society. If we can leap to utopia, that's fantastic. But I mean, right now, let me give you two different examples of situations here, and you can tell me, because I think we're actually going to end up on the same page. Right out here, we have a lot of problems that are happening in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We have 21 individuals that have just been arrested. 6 have been found guilty for civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. It's a mess. On the street, it's pretty much a war zone. In the courthouse, every now and then, not every now and then, I would say 20 or 30% of these officers treat inmates with such incredible respect that it is admirable to watch. They say good morning to them. They make sure that the food's available. They are kind to them when they're in the courtrooms. And the level of violent incidents that these sheriffs experience is by far minuscule in comparison to those who treat inmates with less respect. That's I think, has to be the first step in the long run. But from what I understand, in the law enforcement culture, to treat individuals who are in custody with dignity is considered a no-no. Does that seem true? And if so, would you agree that it's foolish?
I didn't see that in the 20 years I was in law enforcement, but I sure hate it, and it sure happens far too frequently, and the abuse of power by our police happens far too frequently. I'm going to tell you, let's go back to the very basic of what I was talking about when I changed my life. I was writing all these tickets to people,
sure,
and it was wrong. I'm telling you, it's wrong. The wholesale distribution of tickets is another form of taxation.
Exactly right.
And
couldn't agree more.
Fairness in those courts does not exist.
That is true. That is completely true.
And all it is a money game and a way for local agencies to balance their budgets on the back of people who can't afford it.
Do you think that same game's been played in the drug war as far as the application of seizure laws?
Of course it is. Of course it is. And that's why our prisons are so full in this country, and we arrest more people in this country than any other country.
Right now, apparently, we just hit 1 out of every 100 males, which is a terrifying number. And I don't think people realize that it's so expensive. I don't think people realize that things like health care and their quality of living is compromised because we are spending time with these, extended prison sentences, prolonged prison sentences, mass incarcerations, and lack of any alternative and potentially more intelligent.
And they keep spinning the wheel, and the same people, basically the same 85% of recidivists, and especially when it comes to drug abuse, just keep repeating and repeating and repeating.
Let me ask you about that, because recidivism, and I agree, and there seems to be
the problem with crime in America.
That
it's
is
not
exactly
done.
right.
It's recidivist.
So if we're going to address recidivism, and we can address it, and I think we have both violent crime and nonviolent crime, or even we can just satirize drug crime and other crime. Do you believe recidivism would be reduced if we were to combat drug abuse and drug arrests with treatment rather than incarceration?
I think that's definitely one of the alternatives we need to look stronger at. And I know that there's some courts that actually require like first or second offense, they require rehab. And so I have to question how we'd have to look at the numbers and see that. But this is what, you asked me for answers. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had better solutions for you. But I do know this. We have got to go back to those basic fundamental principles that our country was founded upon. But as far as the drug problem, we have to get everybody together that I was telling you earlier, all the government agencies, all the schools, all the churches, and get together and come up with something else. And we have to admit, government needs to admit, and I know our pride almost disallows this, we have got to admit that the drug war has been a huge failure,
sure,
that we haven't done it right, that spending $92 billion on a problem that we actually helped cause, and that we don't secure our borders, and allow all these drugs to come in, and then say, "Oh, well, we're going to really go after. We're going to have zero tolerance after it gets here."
It doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely absurd.
And it's an easy stat builder, and it also seems to be a way to disenfranchise so many members of so many members of a community that may not have had access to the same quality of education, to the same quality of housing, to the same basic minimal resources that helped some of us succeed.
And let me tell you, our organizations, CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, we train in patriotism, we train in the Constitution, we train in nonviolence, we train that we put liberty first.
Sheriff Mack, I've actually visited. I've visited your website, and I'm going from memory here, but it's sheriffmack.com. Is that correct? Or please clarify.
Well, that's my personal one, but okay. CSPOA.org is really the
one thing that I found very unexpected and admirable on your website was the very personal way, and this is your personal website, but was the very personal way that you stand by officers who have either experienced, physical illness or have undergone scrutiny from the federal government. It's actually incredibly honorable to watch an officer.
Let me put one of that into perspective. One of our good constitutional sheriffs from Elkhart County, Indiana, Brad Rogers, has an Amish farmer in his community that was being attacked and harassed and harangued and spot inspected by the FDA. Some people think that's great. I don't. I don't like it, and I don't. The federal agencies come in and run our farms and personal lives and families, blah blah blah. I don't like any of it.
Sure.
However, let's just take the story. The Amish are very passive, and the federal government said, "We're coming in to inspect your property right now." He says, "Okay." So they come in, everything's fine. Then they come back and they do it again. Then they come back and do it again, and they take his milk off to a lab and they test it. Well, the Amish don't pasteurize their product.
Sure.
Okay, it's raw milk, it's raw cheese, raw butter. And I've used these products, and I've used them a lot. And
a lot of people
great.
Swear by them, yeah. A lot of people believe they're infinitely more healthy.
They're healthier. They're healthier for you, period. And so finally, the Amish farmer got tired of it, and without any probable cause, they were taking him before a grand jury in Detroit, about 350 miles away. He didn't have any way to get there, and he's tired of this, and he calls the sheriff, and he says, "I haven't done anything wrong, and the FDA just keeps attacking me. I've passed all their inspections," but he didn't have to allow him to do any of the inspections.
No. I mean, this sounds like the beginning of Waco, Texas.
That's the main point.
Yeah.
That's the main point. He did. And so Brad Rogers contacts the FDA and say, "Look, if you don't have probable cause, if you don't have a duly signed warrants, and you don't have due process, then if you come back into my county to do that, I will consider arresting you for trespassing." Now, he made that threat against the FDA. The FDA didn't like it, and they threatened to arrest Rogers. And then Rogers contacts me. He's had my training. He's a great guy, and we prepared a response to the FDA. We sent it off, and bottom line is the FDA completely backed off. They sent the Amish farmer a letter saying everything had been dropped, and basically they didn't apologize, but it was
that's a huge win. I mean,
it is a win.
That's a huge win.
Now, I want to ask your citizens. I want to ask
our citizens. We share them, and our non-citizen listeners.
But I want to ask your listeners, which kind of sheriff do you want in your county and in your community? Do you want a sheriff who is a check and balance on the federal government coming in and doing these types of things to anybody? I don't care if it's the IRS, the EPA, or anyone else. Do you want a sheriff with the guts to stand and put himself in the way as a buffer for that kind of abuse? Or do you want the sheriffs like Sheriff Gillespie in Clark County during the Bundy siege, or do you want that sheriff who says, I don't have the authority to interfere?
I fully get your position, and I have tons of respect for states' rights in states that have managed to successfly regulate themselves and protect human rights. But I'm out here in L.A. Right now, it looks like our former sheriffs Baca and Tanaka are ultimately probably going to be indicted. The reason they're going to be indicted is for two reasons.
I know Baca.
And what happened, as you may know, was the hiding of an FBI informant, and they changed his name in the computer, and it ended up being obstruction of justice. But what really happened, what was so much more frightening, is that the Twin Towers facility has become a situation that is so decrepit that has actually increased rather than decreased a risk of suicides, and such that the Department of Justice has stated, all right, just staying there is an Eighth Amendment violation. And we in L.A. weren't able to regulate it on ourselves. We weren't able to fix it on ourselves. We weren't able to stand by the rights of this community because potentially we didn't care about them because they were inmates. It took the federal government coming into L.A. to say, hey, look, this is inexcusable. Otherwise, the only other avenue to make things better, we're going to be civil lawyers myself, who are going to take taxpayer money and incentivize providing bare minimum quality standards for these individuals. And what do we do in that situation?
I'm glad they did it, and I hope that every agency, federal, state, and local, is aimed at protecting citizens' rights. I hope everybody does it. But the state should have interfered with that, and they didn't, so the feds did.
I can't agree with you more, and I think that...
it just shows how corrupt the system can get, and I do believe that L.A. is too big, and they need to divide that. They need to make some more counties there, and in Arizona they need to do the same thing. There's only 15 counties in Arizona. Maricopa County is way too big. It's the fifth largest city in America, or Phoenix is, and Maricopa County is like one of the top, the largest sheriff's office. They're too big to handle, just like the federal government is too big to handle. Barack Obama can't manage those millions of employees. It's impossible. It's too big. It's too monstrous. And when you get those things that big, these things can happen. Baca, though, he went along with this corruption. He didn't stand. We have got to have leaders in law enforcement who we can trust, who are true leaders, who police their own agencies. And I do not support, though, however, that the FBI supposedly is the police of all local corruption.
I would join you on that, and I'm surprised. I got to say, having you on my show and having read about you, it has been it's actually been such a pleasure, and I hope we can continue this dialogue in the future. Got about a minute left. First, I know your website is www.sheriffmack.com, and I do really admire the way that you stand by your fellow law enforcement officers on that site. Would you tell our listeners again about your personal website if they want to read more about the work that you're doing? I mean, your other website, not the Sheriff Mack one.
The other website is CSPOA.
And
Constitutional Sheriff's Peace Officers Association. CSPOA, CISPOA.
Perfect. And if you were to give my listeners, all listeners, pretty much a soundbite as to what we can do to make us safer now, what we can do to make us safer in the world of law enforcement, what advice would you give?
Get a relationship with your local police, work with them in protecting the community, and I totally believe what Sheriff Clark in Milwaukee has done. He was our CSPOA Sheriff of the Year last year, and find out what he has done to make his community safer. And Detroit Chief of Police, they're both mentioned in my recent book, and get that book, Are You a David?
Now, there's a big split, of course, between the sheriffs in Milwaukee and Chief Flynn. There's definitely of the Milwaukee Police Department. There's definitely a split mentality. But
yep, I write about that in my book.
I will read it because I'm sadly intricately involved in the Dontre Hamilton matter.
It's only available at cspoa.org.
Okay, Sheriff Mack. Hey, listen. I did not expect this to be as pleasurable as it absolutely was. Please, come back whenever you wish, and thanks so much for sharing your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, one thing that people who steadfastly believe in gun rights don't like to discuss is what can happen when people who shouldn't have access to guns get them. And on May 23rd of 2014, 22-year-old Elliot Rodger stabbed 3 people to death, including 2 roommates, and then fatally shot 3 others and wounded 13 others in a killing spree throughout the town of UC Santa Barbara before taking his own life. Now, despite these types of incidents, some people still believe that gun laws shouldn't change, or the lack of gun laws shouldn't change. They have these ideas that guns should only be taken away from someone's, cold, dead hands, or whatever sayings embody their ideas. But there's other people out there who are trying to make change. They're trying to impose some simple, life-saving measures on who has easy access to weapons that can so easily take a human life. And one of those people is Assemblyperson Das Williams. Now, California Assemblymember Das Williams, along with California Assemblymember Nancy Skinner and others, in response to what happened at UCSB, have authored a bill and are now pushing it through. It's AB 1104, and its purpose seems pretty narrow in scope, but I'm not going to tell you about it. Thankfully and welcoming to my show, we have with us today Assemblymember Das Williams. Mr. Das Williams, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad that you indicated the number of people who were wounded as well. Some people will equate that half of the victims died by knives, that guns aren't the problem. But there were 70 rounds of ammunition that night expended upon folks, and there was several thousand rounds of ammunition that had yet to be expended. And the perpetrator, Elliot Rodgers, had attempted to walk into a sorority, which was one of the first and primary targets of his killing spree. Fortunately, they refused to open the door. If they had, there would have been far more victims, and the tragedy would have been compounded. I grew up in this community, just a couple blocks away from each one of the crime scenes, and it's something that's hit Santa Barbara and Isla Vista in particular very hard. We were shocked. We were full of mourning. We didn't at first immediately go to an idea of legislation. But one of the key facts that emerged in this case was that the parents of the perpetrator had recognized that there were dangers, that he was posing a danger, and that they had not had any legal right to intervene. All they could do is tell the police that there might be a problem, and then the police did a cursory investigation, determined that the perpetrator was able to hoodwink them into believing that he was stable.
So there was no mechanism for people who were capable of identifying a legitimate threat to do anything about it. And I take it there still
Absolutely.
Really is.
And that's what our bill attempts to do. I wanted to do a thoughtful, measured response to this tragedy, something that might have prevented it if it had been in place, and to give loved ones who are often the first to recognize signs of someone being suicidal or homicidal the ability to intervene to save lives.
Now, how does this bill do that, and what does this bill do in the state that it's in right now, in the state as it's written right now?
It is similar in structure to how a domestic violence or a stalking restraining order is obtained, but it establishes what's called a gun violence restraining order. If a loved one or a law enforcement personnel sees evidence that this person is posing a threat to themselves or others, they can go to a judge and present evidence to that judge. And if the judge deems the evidence clear and convincing, the judge can grant a gun violence restraining order. He would do so for a limited period of time until there's a chance for the person in possession of the gun.
So this isn't just a blanket, anybody can say, hey, I think so-and-so's in trouble, and instantly they're going to lose their capacity to hold a gun. It needs to have judicial oversight, and it's temporary in nature until I take it there's a hearing, and the individual could then challenge the restraint at that time. Is that Is that a fair summary?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And, and this system has worked for over a decade now with domestic violence and stalking restraining orders. But let's just be really clear here. Often it will be a spouse or a parent or a child of someone that recognizes that someone is so suicidal that they pose a threat to themselves, or is increasingly bittered and wishes to lash out at the world and is in possession of firearms. And I don't know anyone who would be more often the person who will see the signs.
Sure. And unless the person is undergoing some type,
someone who's living with them.
And unless the person's undergoing some type of of treatment, which is so rarely the case, the family or the people closest to them are going to be the only people who are going to have that window.
That's right. And we felt that this would be appropriate also to extend to law enforcement personnel. This ability exists in 2 other states for law enforcement personnel, and we thought that would be good to bring California law into the same kind of use.
And when you say law enforcement, you're not saying that these law enforcement personnel have the right to say to someone, hey, I deem you unsuitable to carry a gun. You're saying law enforcement personnel can go through the same processes, right? They can go to a judge and say, hey, look, there's a concern. Please evaluate it. And only then can the judge issue some form of restraint.
That's right. And you as an attorney, you'll understand that it's very important that we have a clear and convincing evidentiary standard. This is not simply suspicion of posing a threat to themselves.
And let me just chime in. Let me just chime in really quick to the.
This is clear and convincing.
Right, and just so our listeners out there understand, there's a whole bunch of different standards that are available in the law. I'm not going to go through them right now. Clearly the one that people are most familiar with is beyond a reasonable doubt. You got to be outside of any thoughts that this is a bad idea are simply unreasonable. More likely than not, is the preponderance standard. We see that in civil case. Clear and convincing. This is you need a lot of evidence. I mean, clear and convincing is the standard that people need to decide to take someone off life support or to take children away. You need a lot of evidence in order to convince a judge to take this action under that standard.
And what kind of and a lot of people wonder, well, what kind of evidence would that have been in this case? Well, the evidence would have been the YouTube videos he posted that essentially threatened to take revenge on all young women in particular, but also all others in the community, and things on social media and perhaps comments that they had made to the parents themselves.
So it doesn't seem like
in a case like this, it would be possible to reach that evidentiary standard if some of these things come up.
I mean, it seems to me like this bill is basically dedicated towards setting up a mechanism where people who can, exactly what you said, people who can really hurt themselves or hurt others for a period until a hearing shouldn't have access to weapons.
That's right.
That doesn't seem that a far-fetched idea.
Going back to your point about some people having a problem and believe, people who believe that someone who's mentally unstable should have firearms is just simply never going to agree with my legislation or, frankly, my community.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
I'm going to tell you that in my community, I know gun issues is a very partisan issue in most areas, but in my community, we have been faced by such a tragedy. It is no longer a partisan issue, and many gun owners have actually been very appreciative that my response has been measured and targeted. Every right that we possess as Americans is a qualified right that can sometimes be lost with cause, right? Our right to free association can be revoked if we commit a crime. In fact, it can, you've heard of gang injunctions. Our right to free association can even be revoked just with membership into a criminal enterprise.
Sure.
Not even with a conviction on a crime. And so, I think American law is pretty clear. We have and enjoy a great suite of rights, more than most societies in the world. But that doesn't mean that we can't temporarily lose one with cause.
Yeah, I mean, you're going a little further even than I would. I mean, I don't see the word gun anywhere in the Constitution. People say the right to bear arms. I'm like, look, you don't have the right to keep a nuclear arm. I'm not as clear as on what the Second Amendment means as some people with voices much louder and brasher than mine appear to have. But you're saying that even if we accept that it is a right, that let's say the Constitution provides us a right to have a gun, then that right, like any right, should be subjected to certain reasonable limitations that are necessary for public safety.
Yes, and sometimes these would be simply temporary ones. I mean, some people are heavily depressed only for a temporary amount of time. I myself experienced the fact that when my father's fiancée was passing away from cancer, I felt he was heavily depressed, which is very understandable under the circumstances, but also knew he was in possession of firearms. So I said, "Look, you need to hand me your handgun," and sometimes that can be worked out among loving family members, but sometimes that level of depression or that level of homicidal anger is so much that it really is more appropriate.
Sure. Now listen, you talked. It doesn't seem like what you're asking for is all that unreasonable, but yet I imagine it hasn't been easy. What type of hurdles have you faced in trying to get this bill passed, or do you expect to face in getting this bill passed?
Well, I can tell you, we locally in my own community, Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, it's been very popular, but we've definitely been bombarded from outside the area with hostile, angry, and threatening phone calls, emails, and Facebook messages.
And nothing is more comforting than a hostile, threatening message from someone who is potentially armed. That's
and of course, it has not been necessarily easy to get it through the legislature. It's generally been on party line votes. In California,
do we know why that is? I mean, is there some gun manufacturing lobby? Is there some movie lobby that profits off violence? I mean, or is it just this obsession that people have with guns that are since you're a kid you're given a toy gun, you're sent to parks with shooting galleries, you're given video games. Why do we have this mindset? Why do so many people have this mindset that's against a reasonable restraint?
I think most of my Republican colleagues are afraid that if they voted for it or other reasonable restrictions, that the NRA would come after them in the next election.
Okay, I see that at a political level, and that makes a ton of sense. And the NRA can be incredibly dangerous to politicians. But what is it going to take? I mean, I would ask myself, what's it going to take? What if guns killed more people than American soldiers dies in war? Well, that happened and nothing changed. What if guns start being used to kill politicians? Happened for centuries, nothing changed. What if guns are starting to be using in schools? We've had 200 since 1990, around 200. And then what about young children in schools? We have Sandy Hook, and we think, all right, Sandy Hook, this has got to be it. People have got to wake up now. Nothing. 74, one every 5 weeks, 74 school shootings since Sandy Hook. Do people need to be in your situation, like live near people who get killed, or have somebody in their family killed, to realize that maybe we need to have some form of restraint?
I think that's the question. This week we had the families of the victims up in Sacramento helping me try to pass the bill, and that is really the question that they asked loud and clear is how many people have to die before we're willing to make some reasonable changes to our society. 86 people die a day from gun violence in this
86 a day.
86 people a day. It is only exceeded by car accidents and poisonings, which are either suicides or people taking the wrong drugs. So those are the only causes of death that are higher among Americans than gun violence, and I think that is something we have to look at and say, this is something that we have the power to change, but to do so. People are going to have to get as outraged as the other side of things. I mean, what happens is that most people who want reasonable restrictions, they want reasonable restrictions, but they're not ready to get outraged about it. And guess what? The gun lobby is outraged at every reasonable, innocuous restriction.
You know, one thing that sort of was circulating when the stand your ground issue was being talked about so much in the Zimmerman trial, even though it wasn't directly related, is that there is no heightened duty of care. There's no heightened level of responsibility placed upon someone who instigates a conflict while armed. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that if two people are at a bar and one is armed and one isn't, and either one of them choose to, start a fight, they're both only subjected to the same punishment, technically under the law. Like, the one person can lose the fight and say, hey, wow, even though I started this fight, I'm losing it, so now under these laws, I'm potentially entitled to be free from prosecution. We don't put any heightened duty of care or any heightened legal or punitive responsibility on individuals who are armed, and that's frightening to me.
And that is, I mean, look, I believe that there are a lot of responsible gun owners out there. I believe that the majority of owners of guns are responsible, but that is an important phrase, responsibility. And responsibility requires certain things. And in this case, that people who are mentally unstable, that there is some legal route for them to be temporarily deprived of their weapons. And for some, it would just be simply the expiration of time of the gun violence restraining order, which is 21 days. And for some, it could be up to a year. And, of course, these restraining orders are renewable if someone has a permanent condition.
And they're endable, too, right? I mean, the individual who, if someone says, hey, listen, someone has said I'm unstable and I have access to a gun, I am stable. Here, they'd be allowed to get a hearing, show that they're stable, and have the restriction removed.
And what we've heard from law enforcement is really interesting. They say that there are so many people that they encounter that don't meet the definition of what's called a 5150.
And just let me just explain that for the listeners that aren't lawyers or involved in law enforcement. 5150 is when somebody is so potentially mentally unstable that they can pose an immediate harm to themselves. They may or may not have committed a crime, but the state or government agencies are allowed to take hold of that person and basically keep them in custody for an initial 72-hour period that can then be extended for 2 weeks. But the whole idea is, hey, look, we've identified this person as a potential danger. We're going to put a 5150 hold on that individual. So they don't hurt themselves or they don't hurt their others while they're in this state.
And the flaw of our law about 5150 is the only way to do it is a diagnosable mental disorder, and it has to be there has to be a psychologist or psychiatrist that makes that determination.
And our states are,
you know what? We don't have enough psychologists.
Yeah, we don't. Our county budgets are they're already incredibly dried up, and and the people who do choose to devote these licensed professionals who do decide to give this aspect of their time to public service or for incredibly less salary than they make in the private sector are inundated with work to do. So we can't really expect them to be as thorough or as competent as maybe some people in the private sector are.
That's right, and so many people out there, unfortunately, do not have access to psychological help, and so there has to be another way. And pretty much the only routes that we can see where this can be addressed is either through law enforcement or through the family members themselves. And I think this will save lives from these sort of tragic murder sprees. But even more of the lives will be that of people who are enormously depressed, but in possession of firearms that temporarily need to be deprived of it.
If you don't mind, let me ask you a question about what you spoke of earlier about your father-in-law. When you said, listen, I need to take your firearms, and he relinquished them to you, was that detrimental to your relationship with him?
No. That's why I really encourage people to confront one another at some level. We should be a loving society. We should be having loving families. Of course, there's some people who, their level of depression or their level of aggression is so much that wouldn't be a good idea. And of course, that's really what I would recommend to people, the threshold of that's when you should be going to a judge for a gun violence restraining order.
Which right now they can't do.
But God willing, by January 1st, we'll be able to do if the governor signs our legislation.
Now, if the governor signs, it doesn't go. I mean, I've looked at the bill. There'd still be a 1-year lapse, right? I mean, it would take effect in 2016, or do we not know yet?
January 1st, 2016.
And what is the projected future of this bill? I mean, I sadly know all of my state politics through the commercials that would play in between Sesame Street when I was a kid. So I don't know what the life of this bill would be in California until it would actually turn into law. What steps need to transpire?
Well, almost all the steps have gone through. The bill has been heard in committees in the Senate. It has passed through the Senate. It is now in the Assembly. It will have a bill hearing tomorrow morning, and hopefully it will be to the floor of the Assembly tomorrow afternoon or evening. And we are up against a very solid deadline. All the bills have to be out of our House by midnight on Sunday, and so we're encouraged, but we're also in overdrive to make sure that we can get this to the governor's desk. Then the governor would have 30 days to decide whether to sign or veto the legislation.
And if he vetoes it, you're done. And if he signs it, then it comes into law, and then it starts taking effect in January of 2016.
That's right. And our governor has vetoed some gun legislation. He's also signed some gun legislation. He's been very thoughtful, and so we do encourage folks that if they think that this is a measured approach, that they should call the governor's office and encourage him to sign the bill.
Well, yeah, what can they do? They can sign the bill. They can write him a letter. They can go to his website as well, right?
Absolutely. Fortunately, our government is pretty accessible. They can write the governor an email. They can write him in the state capitol. You don't even need to put an address. Just Governor Brown, State Capitol, Sacramento, California, and it'll get there.
Fantastic. And what should these people say to others who may have really steadfast Second Amendment views? Is there like a soundbite? Is there something that we can just say to pass along about, hey, why this is a good thing, not a bad thing?
Absolutely. Just that we're not trying to paint all gun owners with a broad brush. We know that there's a lot of responsible gun owners, but we simply feel that sometimes people are a threat to themselves or others, and that the high evidentiary standard required in this law will prevent it from being abused in the manner that Second Amendment advocates sometimes worry about.
Well, Assemblymember Williams, a couple of things. And first of all, he's actually taking his time from the floor to help us sort of understand this bill and its importance, and I'm incredibly thankful for you for doing that. It's incredibly kind.
As I speak, I am in a phone booth on the side of the floor.
I didn't know they still had those.
Still exist.
If they're unbelievable. Oh my God! When the next Superman movie comes out, maybe we're going to see it. So we've been speaking with Assemblyperson Das Williams of the 37th District in California. If you want to read about him, you can go to www.asm.ca.gov/Williams. If you simply Google the bill, AB 1104, you'll be
1014.
Oh, 1014. I'm so sorry. So it's a little number dyslexia there, but AB 1014. You'll be able to read it and its text. And thank you. Thank you for not only for taking the time, but thank you for doing something. I mean, this is a big step. It's any step that actually gets done is a huge step in the right direction. And it seems like all you're asking is, hey, listen, let's find a quick, simple way to try to save lives and take people who are capable of hurting themselves or others, stop them from that, because everyone's going to be the better for it. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Many of these tragedies can be avoided and so many of these kids would have a chance to grow up with their parents.
Well, listen, my heart is with you, and I hope the votes are too. Thank you so much for coming on the show and explaining what you're trying to do, and thanks for doing it. All right, folks, we are out of time, so we got to wrap it up. Check us out at renovatejustice.com. Contact me at wallachlegal.com. Send me your thoughts at change at renovatejustice.com. And please, folks, let's keep using our heads. Let's stop using our hate, and let's make change. We can do it. We can pull it off. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend.